I would tell young guys to be willing to take on risks, to travel as much as they can, as early as they can, to learn different things and be exposed to different, to try different foods, to try different, because all those things come handy when you're trying when in your career at some point or the other, right? And I tell my kids that life is really about putting stuff in your backpack in case you need it in the future. Those first few years of your professional lives are powerful. You get experiences that define who you will become.
The Job Guppy podcast is on a mission to help career explorers and job seekers find out from real people what a specific career or job is really like on a day-to-day basis. Join me, your host, Chris Hodges, as we dive in and explore jobs with each guest. You'll hear from experienced working professionals with transparent, realistic, and job-specific insight about the daily roles and their career journey. We go on to explore other topics like job search recommendations and income and salaries. You'll hear answers to questions like, do I need to go to college for this job? How much college? What is your work-life balance like? What do you like or dislike, or what would you do different? And if you don't like what you hear about one job role, we discuss alternative job titles to explore related to the same industry. And my favorite part is the end, where the guest shares their inspirational insight and recommendations for the next person wanting to get started on their career journey. In this episode, we get career advice from business transformation consultant Jesus Patino. He goes over the skill sets that can help someone succeed in this role, and project examples are provided so you can hear what kind of work someone in this career field may be doing. While there is a somewhat traditional career path approach to being a business consultant, Jesus explains that this career field is really open to anyone who can leverage their experience and skill set to do this kind of work. Jesus' career journey is interesting because his career started in a very different field of work. He shares his journey, where he thought he wanted to start, where he actually started, then the very moment he realized he wanted to make a switch in how he did it. At the end, he gives his thoughts on how change can be a good way to gain experience that helps one later in their career, but at the same time, he recommends to find things to be committed to also. Links to specific references, companies mentioned, and job search ideas discussed in the interview are on the Job Guppy website. Jesus, thanks for joining us. I'll let you go from here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Chris. Happy to be here. So what do I do? I am a business transformation consultant, work for a small firm called Airmill Solutions, which essentially provides resources for companies to solve different types of problems, right? Anywhere from commercial and legal issues, right, to things related to business structure, business planning, is strategic planning, down to very, very, very tactical type of issues, right? How to solve inventory management problems, all the way up to how to develop, a sales and business development plan for a foreign country. So for the last several months, I've been working with a small company in Houston, Texas, medium-sized company, I would say, family-owned business, right? That was very interested in developing its business abroad and come up with a 5-year plan to identify growth opportunities and start executing on that. So I help them in that takes me, sometimes to the shop to talk to the shop guys to working with new products, right? Or to somewhere in South America, trying to do sales and visits to companies using that have a need for the types of products that the company does.
Okay, so it is international.
It's becoming international. It has been mostly focused in the US, right? But the company, when we identified that there's a big opportunity abroad, and we're chasing it right now. We're defining the teams, defining the structures, and helping navigate all that.
So a better way of saying it is it can be international. Your position, your role, the function you're doing, it can be international. It may not always be, but it can be at times.
Yes, it can be international, and I would say that my background and my profile, my career, right, has that aspect and I try to leverage where I go. So I was born in Mexico. I started my career there. Had a chemical engineering degree and did a number of years working offshore, going out to offshore rigs and working with drilling fluids, being a mud engineer, which is a specific position within the drilling process that takes care of the fluids that are used to make holes to find oil and gas. And then after that, I had the opportunity to go overseas and work for a couple of years, also in offshore operations in West Africa. And then that I moved to Houston to pursue my master's in business, my MBA, did a full-time MBA here in Houston, 2 fantastic years. And what I would say life-changing years for that grad school. And after that, I went back to oilfield services until a couple of years ago when I started doing this consulting services. And it's a little bit of a mix of consulting and it also has its entrepreneurial aspect to it. So,
yeah. Okay.
For example, I spend a lot of my time today, thinking through sales lifecycle, generating contacts, developing relationships, following up, calling people, generating the opportunity, and closing out on sales. Right? It doesn't matter if you're selling cars or if you're selling large subsea projects. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, the processes are similar. The behaviors of the people involved in both sides of the relationships are also similar. So if you're able to understand and navigate those processes, right, you can apply those skill sets to different
and that's what I'm trying to get to is like to pull out, and I don't quite have maybe the words I'm like maybe to pull it out the way it's in my mind right now, but it is like what is that common, like you said, it could be anything you're selling. So you have this mindset, what you're doing, and we'll get into later maybe job search ideas and like what would somebody do. Because now it sounds like it could be very large. So it's not like somebody's chasing an industry here. They like this kind of work. They like breaking things down at this level. It's not that they may care what industry they're associated with. They might find some funner than others, but they just like this kind of work in general. It's more about that than it is about what industry they might be like kind of going after. So back to kind of that, was there any one word you would put on, like business consultant? Is that one of the words?
We call it business transformation consulting,
business
right?
Transformation?
Yes, we're looking at what can we do? How can we leverage digital tools, right? The tools available these days are super powerful. How do companies leverage those? And when you think about what are those tools enabling, those tools are enabling access to data, the ability to turn that data into information. I think is a critical one.
Okay,
it's one that requires training. But that one, they can be really powerful, right, in helping companies achieve objectives, right?
Yeah. So let's focus on Airmill. Let's forget about all the other consulting type jobs you could in industries. Let's focus on if just what you do at Airmill, the products you work with, or the type of customers you work with. Projects might be a better way of saying it. How do you engage with people right up front? Do they come to you when they're in trouble? Do they come to you when they're starting companies? What kind of projects are you working on? Is it a lot of people interaction or minimal? A lot of behind the scenes work? Are you hand holding? What's a life cycle like? I guess that might be a good way to break it down. What would be the life cycle of a project like when somebody first came to you?
It's a little bit of everything, right? The last couple of years, right, is that one relationship with one customer has different aspects and different angles, right? A lot of times I used to think that or to see when I came out of business school, right, and going into oilfield services companies, I sort of realized that very large companies, when one could think they're very sophisticated in their processes and the way they make decisions, right, are not so much, right, and they are very empirical in the way they act, and they are not very, not nearly as sophisticated as one would think, right. And the ability to add sophistication to business is a skill that is valuable and it's powerful, and you can add that sophistication in many, many different aspects of conducting business, right?
That's a great way to put it. I like the way you phrase that. The skill to just bring sophistication to that business, to a business. That's a good way of putting it.
And it sounds, if you put it out of context, it could sound arrogant. It could sound like pretentious, right? But it's ultimately about trying to solve complexity by outlining
you're trying to make them look good.
Yeah, exactly.
You may not get all the credit for it, but the better they look, the more sophisticated you make them, the more profitable they are, the better, the more efficient that their project is. That's
the
your
less
goal.
waste the company is generated, right? And therefore the more value it can kind of capture. But it has, right? It has, so I said aspects. I mean, procurement, right? Practice of purchasing stuff, right? Managing inventories, right? What are the proper inventory levels, right? To manage working capital, and if you manage working capital properly, you release value by releasing cash that can be used for different activities, right? But then you start looking at all different business functions, right? You move all the way up to the front end of the revenue cycle, right? And that, but there's also the need for structuring, for sophistication in that sales front. So I spent had the benefit to have a customers that have been giving me the opportunity to get involved in different aspects of it. And I have a background that also has, I've been exposed to the different functions, business functions, so I can help those different things, right? Part of this exercise that you're like having here is identifying, okay, what are those things and how's career evolves, right, for someone. And that, if when I reflect on my career, I think one of the best things that has happened to me is having had the opportunity to have different roles with organizations, right? Having exposure.
And would you say different roles within this organization,
No,
or
within
just across
previous
your
organizations where I worked before.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Coming off when you think, I mean, coming off of school, right? You go into, I did chemical engineering, but if you come off out of electrical engineering, most kids that are undergoing an electrical engineering program, they think that they're going to be designing chips whole lives, right?
Yeah.
And yes, there may be some of that, right? Yes, some of them could go into that. But the skill set that you acquire when you're going electrical engineering can be leveraged in many, many, many different aspects of doing business, right? And having that analytical framework that you develop in school can be extremely powerful in other aspects of.
So right before we go back to the college days, circle around one more time, and I guess part of what you're doing with people, you do have a job where you interact with people. So this isn't something where you get to quietly, as an introvert, sit in the background and be at a computer all day. You're in front of people. You're standing up, giving presentations? I guess
I do a lot. So I do a lot of analysis, internal analysis, right, to show and to expose waste, things like.
And you do the analysis, like you're studying.
I do it.
You're
because,
not just
because I am just too.
Okay.
I just enjoy it too much to be up. It's one of those things that I'm guilty of, right? Spreadsheeting myself to.
I'm looking for the skill set. Like, what skill sets make you successful that you feel make you successful at this job? Like, so somebody listening could say, I have those skill sets and I like what I hear about this job. Like, I might be interested in something like that.
I have a very strong analytical background, right? The ability to process data, right? I ran a data science team of data scientists developing solutions for the maritime industry in a previous role, right? The reason why I was given that opportunity is because I have strong, I understand what it takes to analyze data and how it's data analyzed, right? Part of that is formal training, right? Taking your statistics and data analysis classes in undergrad or graduate school, right? But also part of that is actually doing it in the real world and putting together the slides.
And that's a skill at your job now?
That's
presentation-wise, interaction with people, that's a big deal?
But when you look at analyzing data, right, it's really not about getting the right answer, although you should try to get the right answer, right? It's really about being able to tell the story that the numbers are. This underlines the numbers, right?
Turn in what you find. I can relate to that because that's something my job I like to try to do is I'm an electrical engineer. I do a lot of debugging. I may go through days of stuff where but then how do I turn that into a story, a short sentence that I can relate to somebody else that hasn't sit there with me for 5 days and been down all those roads? So, I call that storytelling. Like, how do you take that information, get it out of your head without overburdening the person you're telling it to? How do you translate it into something that they can easily absorb? So that's, that'd be another skill set on top of just researching and looking at data, which is a skill set by itself, turning that into a story that translates to everybody, a picture of what you're doing.
Finding the right answer in the data is not helpful. You cannot empower people to actually change behaviors or make decisions or change the direction, right? So that's right. It sounds a little bit of a cliche, but
what about leadership? You've empowered people, you've given them information. Do you find that you have to get involved a lot in leadership and steering, or do you kind of hand it over at that point? It's up to the person you're working with.
Well, yes, I have an influence, and you have, if not a direct, not power directly to ask people to do things, right? You establish the mechanism of accountability to do that, right?
Yeah. Okay.
What you're asking is if the role involves herding a lot of cats. Yes, every job involves calling people and asking, following up, and establishing those accountability frameworks.
I find accountability a subtle way of saying leadership without saying I'm the lead role or I'm telling you what to do. Establishing accountability is a very subtle way to say, here, the ball's in your court. There's some expectations. We agree on these, and let them be accountable. And hopefully that leads them and that herds the cats to the goal that you worked on. Okay.
One thing that I found, back in the company I work for, they were big on writing project charters. Writing the charter and who are the members of the team, what is the purpose, and what are the limits, right? And what is it time bound, and all the different things that you would have spent a lot of times writing a charter. And it's kind of sometimes that's kind of annoying. Why do we need to do this, right? But it turns out that documenting agreements is a very effective way to get things done. So when you're able to bring that structure to other places, to places that don't have a structure, that's a very efficient way of.
So I would call that another. If you want to be successful, you don't have to be successful, but if you do want this kind of job and you actually want to be successful and well known for what you do, like that would be another good skill set. Is kind of how do you move things from that analytical stage, tell the story to somebody, and then empower them, and then turn around and like now help them get to where they need to be, that the goals they set. And so
as a consultant, you're ultimately measured against those results, right? Against your ability to deliver, to make that organization, act on and implement those changes that you're identifying.
Yeah, you have some skin in the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
That's kind of the that's the only way that you can prove your value, right? And the reason why organizations use consultants is because people have day jobs, and people have in doing these things. They're stepping back in reframing problems, right? And proposals, and suggesting, roadmaps to change things is time consuming, is hard work, and really requires expertise.
To me, I feel like you've covered a good bit of what you do. If I was trying to describe kind of what your daily life was like, how much time you spend behind a computer in front of people, even on the road, I think we probably have a good scope of all of that. So going back to the college days, I guess if you could kind of talk about, you don't have to like go through the whole path unless you'd like to talk about every job you've had, that's fine. But, trying to connect dots of where you're at now in this role, mm-hmm. and, doing that storytelling for somebody back in school who's kind of wondering what they could be doing, or they like what they hear, like you were chemical engineering, maybe somebody's in chemical engineering and they're kind of undecided about where to go with it. This sounds like a lot of different majors could look into this. What was your approach to doing this?
I am an engineer that doesn't do a lot of engineering these days. So coming off of...
I call that a smart engineer, by the way.
I don't know about that, but I'll take your word for that. So I came off school and struggled the first couple of years to find graduating in Mexico, and I thought I wanted to have a career in the food industry. Things were, the economy wasn't doing good, struggle, and I just had a call one day from a friend of a friend that told me, hey, there's going to be this drilling fluids school that is going to happen in a couple of months. If you want to join, you can. And sure enough, I went in and took, actually, it sent me to Houston, Texas, from Mexico to do a 9-week drilling fluids school. It went great, and came back and started working offshore, and just going to the rigs, 2-3 weeks on, 3 weeks off, and just starting a different path from what I originally thought I wanted to take. Would work out. Money was good, had free time. There were a lot of good things that came with that, right? Also, it's downsides, right? You have to be out there, right? 2-3 weeks at a time, and we had a girlfriend, and you don't have a lot of time to spend with your girlfriend when you're offshore, and all of those things that. So I did that in either for a few years. Then I started going. I was offered the opportunity to go and work overseas. and I went to Africa, spent a couple of years doing the same thing. In the meantime, I obviously I got married. I had a baby, and after a while, I mean, the job was great. The money was good. There was a career there, right? You could, I mean, there are people that choose to live, that lifestyle for years, being 4 weeks off, 4 weeks on, and or just staying in that industry and job style, right? Or becoming a project manager and just continuing that path. I remember that I was in I was in in an offshore rig in Ghana, and it was like a Sunday 2 a.m. in the morning. So the night I was working the night shift, right, and we stopped operations because we got to the target that we wanted to, and the next step was to either continue drilling, right, or pulling out the hole on the pipeline, 2,000 meters of pipe, right, which was going to take 24 hours to run a different set of toolings to run some measurements, right. It was a, I don't know, $2.5–3 million decision, right, just in rig time, and we were 4 hours in the rig in Ghana waiting for the call from Dallas, Texas, to decide whether or not to continue. What was the next operation, right? And I couldn't help but thinking about, there was some guy crunching numbers in Dallas, Texas, late on a Sunday evening to make a decision worth millions of dollars for a bunch of guys to work, just do something offshore, right? And I saw myself, standing in the rig floor, and it was like, hey, I can continue doing this. What I do here is important, right? You're in a very important industry for the economy. You're creating, this is good work. This is great, right? But I am not part of the decision. The decision has been taken by somebody else that is not here, that clearly has a different skill set from mine, and is looking at other things that I just don't have visibility of. And that's what made me go to business school and apply in
Let's
getting
see,
an
to hear
MBA.
the catalyst of, like what made that. There was a switch. I mean, I probably might not have asked that question, but for you, there was a switch of a moment you can remember where I won't even call it a light bulb, just a switch in your way of thinking that kind of led to some of that. And I'll do a quick side plug here for another podcast I did, where what you're describing about the operations manager and the guy in Dallas crunching the numbers. I do have another podcast with a geologist in the petroleum industry who does the operations manager, and he talks about a lot of that stuff. So that's kind of neat to hear you describing it. And I'm like, oh, I actually kind of know what he's talking about. Like
Those careers,
so,
yeah, those things connect. I actually saw that podcast that you mentioned, and I enjoyed it.
I
So
did.
it's highly recommended.
Probably the more directly related educational connection to what you're doing now was the MBA.
Yes, arguably yes, because that's where I got my marketing courses and my corporate finance. I didn't have a formal financial education, right? That's where I learned accounting. That's where I got strategy classes, right? Which us engineers love to say that those are soft skills, right? Those are the easy based classes, and the things when you think about it, those are the classes that make people able to to communicate well, to improve their communication skills, to tell stories, right, and to understand complexity, right? And that complexity that is not easily written down or summarized into a model, right? Which is what
Yeah, it kind
engineers.
of gives you that sophistication to bring sophistication to other things. Like you
Yeah,
have some skills, but you don't know what direction to point them.
yeah,
You're trying to figure
absolutely.
things out that other people have already figured out. Like how to maximize, how to be efficient. That's kind of what the MBA is doing for your skill set. So move forward a little bit, and I have a few generic questions that I like to always sprinkle in. But is there anything that might surprise people to know about you and your job, or something that's like you feel is a little different in who you are in your job compared to most of the other people that are in this kind of job that you maybe work with, their peers? Or, I mean, is there anything that kind of comes out, or like a surprise of, I didn't know it was going to be like this when I, started. I was really surprised to learn that, whatever that might be. It's okay if there's not, but if there is, sometimes some interesting things come out with that question.
So well, the thing is I guess that is different in my experience is that, I mean, when you think about consulting in general, right? I'm ultimately, I am a consultant, right? when you think about consultant, there are very well established tracks for consulting, right? If you come of college to join a consulting firm, right? One of the big consulting firms, the Deloittes of the world, the KPMGs, the McKinseys, right? That do strategic management and business consulting, right? There are specific points in your career, right, where you can access to those paths to join those type of firms, right? And if you don't go there, schools, right? These firms, they recruit from specific schools, right? A year before graduation, right? Because they want to have the cohort coming up, right when they finish college, right? And they groom them and they expose them to a lot of different things, and they have a very, very well defined path and career path within those organizations, right? And the same happens at the grad school level. When you come out of business school, there are specific points where you can enter those careers. And if you try to get, for a different path, it's going to be very hard. Nowadays, I am doing consulting, right? And I am just happening to be, doing very similar jobs and perhaps not having access to the same customer base because those is definitely different customer base. What I have found is that there is a very, very, very large need of expertise definitely beyond with the big companies and the big marquee names that one tends to think of.
Okay.
So yeah, I think it's in consulting. There's a lot of different things. The need for sophistication is everywhere.
Yeah. And so a few things I keyed in on there is, and that kind of goes in with some of I might put it, you can rephrase it for me if you like, but I might put it that, one thing that's a little unique about you and your role is you didn't come up through those paths of where you were starting there. So that's one of my questions is, do you have to start in a certain area to get this role? And what I'm hearing is, no, you don't. You could start off somewhere else, and yeah, you might have had to be a little more intentional than some other people who just work their way up through it, like to kind of make that switch at some point, but you found a way so that it is possible. So some jobs, it's just a hard no, like it's not going to work. There are roles like that where it's just not going to happen. Some are obvious, like a doctor. Some are a little more, like the petroleum engineer. He said it's pretty much a master's degree, the geologist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I even asked him, like, are there other ways to do it? And he was like, unless you know somebody who owns a small company and lets you come work,
right,
like it's probably not going to happen. But in this role, you got to think about how you might do it or make a career shift. If somebody was listening that's already down the road of a career, but there's ways to do it, go try it. It's not there's an opportunity there. You just have to be willing to put yourself out there. Another thing was about the credentials in your role of, did you need the MBA? Or if you didn't come from a business school, like, are there ways around it? Like your work, what you were doing, maybe a little analytical in the petroleum industry, or, then you got your MBA and like all of that to kind of married well together to kind of like help open the door for you. Is that?
Yeah, I don't think there's any I haven't encountered that an engineering degree or an MBA degree, right? A condition sine qua non.
So it's up to the individual, really. What I'm hearing is up to the individual to look for something, seek something out they like, make a pitch for it. Don't tell themselves, no, I don't have the credentials. Let the company tell them no, but nobody needs to say, I don't, other than personality traits like we talked about earlier or skill sets you might have, but there's no credential basis that says I'm going to stop because I don't have the credentials. Like,
right.
It's wide open.
It's really wide open. It's a lot more about your personal brand and about your networks and about what other people say about you
and once you get it, maintaining it, keeping it, growing, that's
exactly
becomes a whole new
ball. That's very easy to get.
Yeah,
to destroy also.
So, do you have, and these kind of go together, any like or dislikes that you'd like to reference here that you'd want to forewarn people about that are really great or maybe really negative about what you do? And that goes a little bit along with work-life balance. How is that for your, this kind of role?
I always tell people that I have a theory of the sexy job, right?
I'm curious on
it. In my theory of the sexy job is that if you ask somebody what they do for a living, right, they will tell you, about the sexy parts of the job. If you talk about, a civil engineer, right, they design big things, right, big bridges or big, I don't know, mega infrastructure works, right? If you ask a investment banker, right? What they do for a living, right, is that they go into roadshows with CEOs and they fly the private jet, right, to do sales pitches and to do mega mergers, right? The reality is that neither the engineer designing the big bridge, right, or the investment banker flying spend the majority of their time doing that. They spend the majority of the time either crunching numbers, right, or putting together slides, right, or hearing cats, or waiting for something to happen. Every job is very sexy in making copies, right, chasing people, or waiting for a phone call, or and,
Mm-hmm.
and I do think that having a happy professional life, right, requires to identify what are the things that really excite you about your job and try to maximize those. In knowing that it's probably not going to be 50% of your time spent doing that. It's probably going to be a lot less. Even then, it could be, I mean, exciting enough, right, for you to devote your time and your professional life to it, right? That's kind of that's one thing. I remember speaking with a very good friend of mine who went on indeed years ago and worked for a big consulting firm in Massachusetts. He would tell me, I mean, yes, I have a great job, a great title, but I do slides, and I have to put together 300 slides for my boss's boss to pick two, just those two,
Yeah.
right? So it's very unsexy.
So the sexy part you talked about was like earlier in the interview when you're talking about these great skill sets and how, the mindset and the mentality and the sophistication that you bring to it. And the unsexy part is you spent, a lot of time in front of a computer putting PowerPoint slides together or crunching numbers that was unsexy for that one sexy moment you did have of sophistication.
Exactly. A lot of hours. I mean, yeah, you have to roll up the sleeves, right, into some things that are
Yeah.
not as fun as one could think, right? That's
Yeah. This is why I want people that are in the field, in the role, working every day, saying these are the things they do. And, it's no, I'm not up giving presentations and flipping whiteboards over and telling somebody to hit the button for the next slide. Like, well, I get to hold my coffee and talk and you look cool. Like, that's what we're looking for. The truth here, like the transparency, the realistic, transparent, not the paragraph you Google, not the company saying, come work for us. Like, here's what you get to do at our job. It's like, we'll find plenty of that stuff, but it's like, what is it really like? And so that's why I like doing it this way. Work-life balance. I mean, how do you?
It's very good these days.
Okay.
I get you. Sometimes you just gotta do what you gotta do, right? In previous roles,
But it's not like it's always that way. You're not stressed out all the time. You're not.
I mean, in a very good place, work life
Good.
balance wise right now. But I've had roles that implied being away from. I mean, when I did work offshore, right? I was out while my daughter was born.
I guess that's a good way of looking at this. I hadn't thought of when I say work-life balance. There's also what is your past experience and perspective? What is good for you?
What it took to exactly.
So traveling once a month for you may be great when you used to have to be out for 4 weeks at a time, and somebody else is like that's a lot of travel. So yeah, I guess I do have to make sure there's some context around that. But at any rate, you're not griping about it, and it seems like you're pretty happy and. You got time to sit here and talk with me today. Thank you for that.
No, absolutely.
So,
Super happy to. I had to cancel like 10 meetings to be here.
That's great.
No, I didn't.
Hopefully you don't submit a bill for the consulting time.
No, that's no way. That's not going to happen. It's all good. This is super nice, super fun.
So I do like to bring up income.
Mm-hmm.
I leave this wide open to specifics or just industry related, however you would like to discuss it, your comfortable level, like your lifestyles and things. So like a job role like yours, and we'll just keep it. I mean, I know it can range, right? Because there's so many different industries that pay probably different levels, and there's geographical locations. Cost of living plays up into all of this, but I would let you maybe just in your own words talk about it.
I mean, yeah, it varies, right? And you have, and it all depends on what model what you work on, right? So, and if you step back, coming off, with an engineering degree, right? In the U.S., it's probably going to put you, upward, 5-figure salary, 60, 70, $80,000 a year. That's what we expect, and you should progress from that, right? Getting a graduate degree in an MBA, right, from a well-regarded school, should make a difference, right? Should make it lower six-figure salary easily. And it's public information, right? You have the average yeah, salaries coming off of school.
Yeah, and I'm not. It doesn't
And
have to be used specifically, but like kind of how you're talking. If that's just from knowing what you know and what you've seen, and just in your what you know about from other jobs and stuff like that.
right.
Like that
And then when
range.
you come into, I mean, you have professional salaries, right? And that's
Mm-hmm.
into these big companies coming out as a consultant, you take on a lot of risk. You essentially are exposed to utilization risk if you're on your own, right? If you are or with a small firm like we are, so we essentially depend on our ability to generate customers and to generate in that rate that we have, right? Whether it's a short-term rate, right, an hourly rate, or a kind of a retainer type of agreement, has to account for that risk that you're taking on. So the part of what I enjoy about this function that I have today is that you have access to opportunities with a lot of upside, right? Opportunities like
Okay.
developing new markets, like developing, and you have the freedom to negotiate, different mechanisms, compensation mechanisms above and beyond your consulting fees and your consulting, right? So the way I see it, right, is that you need to establish a good baseline for income, right? And then identify what are those opportunities and negotiate and be forthcoming about how you want to have exposure to that upside.
So that actually plays in negotiation, plays back into that. If you're not wanting to negotiate, you could do a good baseline, but you're not getting your full potential out of
And,
it.
and a lot of that is also being in negotiating. It also implies being able to articulate your value proposition as an individual. Like what are the things that you're bringing to the table? Why is your hour worth this much money, right? What makes you, special, right? Or how you're creating that value for the organization.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it. Similar about income, but not income. The job search. This might be kind of hard to nail down, but I'll go ahead and ask it anyway. How would one? You mentioned a couple of firms earlier that like that's part of what I'd like to ask too. If there's any well-known firms for this kind of role, if you could list those out, like you give somebody a couple of pointers there, and how to job search, what names to look for, titles, stuff like that.
The big consulting firms are McKinsey, Deloitte, BCG. Those are big, very well established firms with hundreds of thousands of consultants around the world. And it's very competitive, right? They have competitive processes, they have interviews that are, excruciating and long, and people prepare for those, right? Most of the times, those type of jobs, those people recruit from very specific schools, and they are open about what are those schools. There are a lot of smaller firms, right? But you think about consulting, and if you go in, Indeed and those type of places to look for consulting jobs, yeah, a lot of times you have implementation consultants, right? Which are the type of roles that it's people that help companies implement a specific type of software, right? A CRM or an ERP or that. That's yes, it's consulting, but I would be careful about making the distinction between an implementation consultant, right,
Yeah, and
and the
that's
type of
that's what I'm looking for is how does somebody do that? Because if I just went and typed in consultant, that's why I said this might be kind of hard to, so I'm looking for those pointers of like that kind of consultant like you, that you name some companies to apply for, like that are well known. If there are specific schools or programs that you know of and you want to drop any names there or shoot them to me later,
yeah.
that's fine. Where kind of like what I call a golden ticket, like people that go to certain schools are like just kind of gonna open a lot of more doors than somebody that didn't go to that school, kind of thing. If there are some places like that for this, realm of consulting, but then those titles, like you said, don't, you can't just search for consultant or implementation.
Yeah, and what I would think I mean, if you want to go into doing this type of things that we've been talking about, right? I really think that you should be trying to get a lot of exposure. I mean, if you go into big company, right, and within the company, leverage opportunities of learning different things, of being exposed to different roles, right? I really think that that's a path that gives you a lot of chances to get into these things, right?
Yeah.
Whether you're doing it externally, or you end up doing it like externally, like I do, or within the company, right?
Mhm.
The ability to
There's a
get.
few roles I'm starting to realize as I talk to different job roles. There's some career fields where that's actually highly recommended. Like to move around, petroleum industry, consulting, where it's like, why don't you try a few things and learn a few things, get exposure, then you hone in on something. And then there's other fields where it's like, do what you want to do the first 5 years, but then you need to have an age where you lock into something and don't change after that because it's not going to be easy to change.
Right.
So it's interesting to see kind of a little bit of a different approach, and things falling into two different buckets there in that thought. And this is one of different roles. So kind of the wrap-up questions get more into the advice section. So one of the questions, is there anything you would have done different, where you are now?
Sometimes you probably should think about taking on, making changes faster than you think, right? Like I had a role that was 3 or 4 years too long, right? It's hard to make those calls, right? Because when you have a stable job and you have there's status quo is always something hard to challenge, right? And you have a family and you have financial commitments but sometimes it's if you wait too long, right, you miss out on other opportunities that are good. So yeah, it's like thinking being too analytical about making changes sometimes is not the best way, right?
Do you have any inspiring words for the next Jesus who's starting their career journey? And it could be in general, whether it's your role or anything in general. Like, like what is your inspiring words, your advice?
I would tell young guys to be willing to take on risks, to travel as much as they can, as early as they can, to learn different things and be exposed to try different foods, to try different, because all those things come handy when you're trying in your career at some point or the other, right? And I tell my kids that life is really about putting stuff in your backpack in case you need it in the future. Those first few years of your professional lives are powerful. You get experiences that define who you will become. Be a little bit daring, right? Not irresponsible, right? Not and also I think it's important to find a few things to commit to, whether that's a partner or an objective. But having commitment early on is something that I have seen working very well for people.
I like that. That kind of actually aligns with a little bit of my philosophies and stuff, but this is your advice section. So. But okay, well, do you have anything else you'd like to add, or we'll wrap it up with that?
Thank you. I'm happy. I'm excited about part of this initiative, this effort. I'm super happy to share more thoughts, and if anybody ever has questions or something, I'm really happy to. Hope this helps somebody and have fun.
If you like what you hear and want to take the next steps in exploring your career after listening to an episode, go to jobguppy.com to see a summary and helpful links to things mentioned during the interview, like industry-specific forums or websites, example job searches, career ladders, and degree programs or trade school recommendations. The hope is you now have more information than you did before from the guest on the podcast to help you move forward with the next steps on your career exploration journey. Tune in each week as Job Guppy continues to explore a million jobs in the sea.